Pick up any newspaper, and most of the top articles are around how technologies like AI and ML are taking over our jobs. The things that were being done efficiently by skilled men, how is it being now done by algorithms? So there's a big war going around, and we are all aware of it. My name is Prasoon, and I will take you over this journey, and I'll try to show how this war is shaping up. Well, any war has an origin where the things really start, the conspiracy, so to say. I'll talk about that. Then I'll take you through some of the myths that are there in the industry. I'll also talk about performant warriors, how skilled man and trained machines they compare in terms of their performance. And finally, I'll try and put few notes on what can we do, what can be our survival strategy. However, moving forward, all war stories have some conspiracy, some origin, some design. Now, this war between man and machine, I call it as a machine world war. And if you notice very carefully and try to see from the vantage point I'm showing, that the industrial revolution that we see was actually the world war between man and machine. We've never seen it that way because most of the textbook that we go to kind of show it in a very different light. Well, notice two things. On the left hand side, it is showing you all the four industrial revolutions that our mankind has seen. And on the right hand side, just note this guy, which I'm going to be using as a in terms of depicting my point. This man appears all green. He's very healthy. He's doing well. Now, we will go ahead and see how this man is invaded by machines as these different industrial revolutions happen. Now, let's start. The first industrial revolution happened around 1765. This was termed as the first industrial revolution, a very marquee period in the human mankind. And these are the time when emergence of mechanization happened, things that were being done by human beings by their hand. For example, things like agriculture, metal shaping, forging, they were now being done by automations and machines. These mechanical machines were doing it. And if you see closely, we were very happy that this thing was happening while it was the first time this was a machine's victory over human hands. Things that humans were doing by their hand were taken over by automations and machines. Well, you see this guy, the green guy, now has red hands. It depicts that how machines were now competing with the hand. Then came the next industrial revolution around 1870s, something that we know as a second industrial revolution. And here, huge amount of transformation and development happened in the areas like electricity, oil and gas. Now we suddenly had these combustion engine, so locomotives could be created. People started coming up with the first model of car. Chemical synthesis industry took over. Steel industry was in its infancy and was now there. People started using at an early level telegraphs and telephone. Now if you see the revolution had many things that were happening, but one key thing was combustion engine and the fact people didn't need to move around. They can remotely talk or they can go fast on a car. So this was machine's victory over human legs, because you didn't have to now depend on your own capacity to reach from point A to point B. And this is how machine took over your human leg. Then world moved on. We entered the third industrial revolution, which is seen around 1969, that kind of a period. And this era was marked with kind of takeover on the technology side. Things like transistors were created, microprocessors started coming into light. Of course, the initial versions, robots started being deployed in factories. PLCs were invented and deployed. So this was, if you see, the key thing again was the transistor and microprocessor part. Now what it meant was that whatever was machines were deployed to do some kind of a simple logic that human mind used to do. Now the machines were doing it. The microprocessor based systems were doing it. These were the era of early computers. We can see it as a machine's victory over human logic. Now, if you see that small red color area over the brain, which we are trying to say that yes, at this stage, some of the logical functions were taken over, but yeah, it was not a complete takeover. Well, now comes the one where we are living in, the Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. Now this is really a complete takeover, and look at all these keywords and the buzzwords that we listen to every day, and they are real. Things like machine learning and natural language processing, artificial neural network, artificial intelligence. These things really took over most part of the things which was done by evolved human brain. You know, now the big data analytics or all the analytics that machines can do now are much more effective than what a human being can do on its own. Of course, this is not a generic statement, but yeah, it's quite a statement of wide applicability. So this clearly was a machine's victory of the entire human brain. So if you see that green guy that I showed you is now mostly red and invaded. Now in this part, let me talk about the performant warriors. One of the warrior is a man who is trying to do his job, and the other warrior is machine, which is vying for the same job. And the whole idea is to see how do they compare. Now let me take an example of Manish, which is a human resource, and Mac, which is, let's say, some kind of an automation, a robot or an agent, whichever way you want to term it. Now, very important thing is that when you look at story of Manish, he was a pretty good student. He spent 12 years completing his basic education, his schooling and other stuff. Then he went for his undergraduate program in the area of his expertise, and then he got placed in one of the good firms. Typically this process would take close to about 21 years for this guy to be so-called performant. Now when you contrast it with the machine part, maybe this machine only took 5 months. There were 2 months of training its machine learning algorithm, and maybe 3 months of refining and final deployment. So as you can see, there is, for certain skill sets, this contrast is very high. What takes 21 years for a regular human, here machines can do it much faster. Now of course the caveat is that today as we stand, it is not happening in each and every job skill, but this is an example of how sharp the difference can come in being performant. Second problem is that any good employee, when it grows up, he will get team members, and you're expected to take more load. Suppose you're doing well for one of your accounts, there will be an expectation that can you take care of 2 more accounts. So this whole act of even doubling up your workload actually limits you in various ways, and so many things happen. I mean, it's not possible for somebody to just start taking 4 times more load without affecting him. But when it comes to machines, they can take much higher load. So you can just go ahead, press a button, and deploy many more agents, in a very short period of time, and they can start taking on much higher load. Now, of course, this is also with constraints of cost, constraints of what kind of problems that are being solved. Sometimes they're not so easily distributable, but still the gap is very high. It's very convenient for a machine to scale up, and which is not very easy for a human employee. And the last part is, of course, the human factors, that you may fall sick, or you may leave the firm, and there's a lot of unpredictability around the mere fact that we are humans. But when it comes to a robot or a automation or an algorithm, by properly putting in your infrastructure, you can even get a very high uptime, which means the machine may not fall sick or leave the way a human would. And therefore, if you see all these three important performance parameter in certain skill areas, and which are expanding now one after another, machines turned out to be a much better option. So wherever somebody hears about AI and ML taking over the industry, you see lots of emotions, ranging from denial to pessimism to optimism. In this part, I will try to bust some of the myths that are there in the industry by giving you some examples and showing you how AI ML is actually the dynamics of AI ML is playing in the industry today. So the first myth is of people who are pretty optimistic. So far, people who come from the creative industries, you know, I have always thought that hey, creative industry has never been part of you know AI and ML. Generally, all the mathematical or non-creative items have been under threat. So the myth is that if I don't have an automable part, then we probably don't require AI. We are safe. But here comes one recent example which will shake you really. So this is what you see on the right hand side is an artwork that sold for about 400k USD recently in Paris. And the biggest news is that this art was created automatically by an algorithm. This algorithm looked at about 15,000 plus works by human artists, and then was able to understand the whole art of creating an artwork, so to say, and was able to spin out an artwork using the algorithms. Now this is quite threatening because this is a real example of a computer actually creating an algorithm and that thing finally making it to the market. So all the creative folks or people who come from industries which are which have a lot of creative input as the basis, we should all be warned. I mean, there's no safe zone here. Second very popular example is doctor's job. So if you have seen that doctor's job is a pretty intense job. Firstly, it requires more than 30 plus years of your age. I mean, typically doctors are at their performance level in their 30s, and you have invested 30 years of your life, and then you are a doctor, but then you have these technologies like Watson diagnostic that challenge your job, because if you see, a lot of the thing a doctor does is, one of the major thing is that how many cases you have witnessed. So basis your memory, basis your experiences, you may have access to, let's say, 1,000 cases, but where technologies like Watson diagnostic create an edge for themselves is that they are able to tap into a much bigger database which a human cannot even put into his mind. So what Watson diagnostic does is that it takes a patient data and then it kind of runs its algorithm, looks over those historical databases, and is able to diagnose your problem. It could be a cancer or whatever it may be. And again, that's a very threatening proposition, because job of a doctor, if it is at threat, then it's a very fundamental thing that is at threat. So the first myth about that only engineering or technical things being affected by AI is no more true. So it's pretty scary. Let's move on and quickly look at some of the jobs and how they are being put at risk. So things like emotional health or elderly loneliness, these have been handled by psychiatrists so far, right? But now, by using chatbots and very well designed interactions, chatbots are also entering into the area of emotional health care. And this loneliness industry is a very big industry which has given a lot of money to a lot of psychiatrists, but psychiatrists, be warned, I mean, chatbots are coming your way. We already talked about the artistic and creative things. So specifically things like generative artificial neural network are really killing it there. Through that you can generate music also. So all the work of musician and everything is slowly being invaded. Developers. Now the recent researches in the area of automatic program generation has started giving very good results. So there are examples of computer generated C programs which are much higher in quality than what would typically be generated by a human developer. Again, automobile, self-driving car, they are much, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows about it, and in no time there will be a reality here. We all may be driving on a self-driven car, not driving, but maybe sitting in a self-driven car. uh, Another big thing has been that, for example, things like playing games, those things have been very human experience. For example, this game known as Go, which is a Chinese game, and it is considered to be very complex in terms of if you were to model it. Now, very recently, one of the topmost player of Go game was beaten down by a machine learning algorithm, and it was an amazing turnaround point, because even for computers to really learn Go is a very high computationally intensive as well as memory intensive problem, but it was exceedingly done well by the machine learning algorithm. Second myth is that we have imagine I have employed AI. I'm a very proactive company, and I have started employing AI and automation, and I have started automating all the parts that can be automated. So then maybe we are safe, pretty good. I mean, if you are proactive, probably then the AI and ML will reward you. But that's where the funny thing happens. Even if you have done all things right in your automation, you may be hit with AI and ML, because it can shake up the very basic root of your industry. So no one is safe. So imagine you're a car insurance company, so you have this website, and you have this clientele, and you have adopted all the newer technologies, like when somebody goes to your website, he interacts through a chat bot, and insurance claims can be done online through a bot or whatever. And then you have a lot of very good data analytics running, and they are crunching the data, and contacting your clients, giving them offers, stuff like that. Everything is running cool, you're on top of the technology. But suddenly what happens is that, say, the industry changes. Now we have self-driving car which started coming. Now the entire industry will be hit. You will not have the it will not only it will not be a evolutionary situation, but a revolutionary situation, wherein your entire business can get uprooted, even if you have been on the side of technology. So that's the fear. I mean, even if you are one of the faithfuls, there's no guarantee that you will not be hurt. Now this slide talks about type of industries, and what kind of industries are more amenable to being hit by AI and ML. So if you see the spring box on the left, it talks about what are the vectors on which AI and ML typically attacks. Now if you have a repeated task, things which are being done by human being, but they are very rhythmic, they're very periodic, very repetitive. I mean, they are the biggest vectors for any AI ML implementation. Look at the BPO industry, which is probably the worst hit. Look at that box on the right hand side of the screen. I mean, things like robotic automation has already shown the potential that it can replace and really shake up and bring huge amount of layoffs in BPO kind of an industry. Um, then if you see historically, big data, any place we have a lot of data available, historical data, is a very fertile ground for machine learning algorithms, because their basic premise is that if they can get access to the data you have, then that is going to be a big thing. So these are some examples of the type of industries and kind of things that are happening where AI ML are taking over. So things like drug creation, precision medicine in healthcare, all those things are now being done mostly using AI and ML. On the retail side, a lot of revolutions are also happening on the same lines. But I will rather skip the slide and move on. The third and the final myth that I want to address is that of extreme pessimism. So some may feel that that means all jobs will be eradicated and no humans will be required. The scariest picture that can emerge to your mind. It's the area of the pessimists. Now that's not really true, because what people are saying is that the job roles will change. You know, uh, jobs will remain, but they will have a different profile. Very interestingly, Cognizant has come up with this prediction, the road to 2028, where they have tried to predict the kind of jobs that you will see, after about 10 years. Things like, quantum machine learning analyst, master of edge computing, data detective, cyber city analyst. So I think at that time, these will be some of the jobs which will be sought after. And so the news is not that uh, all the jobs will be removed, but yes, we'll be hit badly. Now, again, reminding you that the industrial revolution that we talked about, some people feel that, the fact we survived, we had bloodbath, but we survived the first industrial revolution. We had, a lot of problems. A lot of, the entire industry was shaken up in second industrial and third industrial revolution. But so we survived that, so we can survive this one also. But there's a big difference, because uh, the first few revolutions were more around, you know people with low skill set. But here, uh, because of this emergence of AI and ML, even the higher skill sets have been, challenged, and that's where the war is a little different this time. But this kind of takes care of some of the myths, and we will talk about how to kind of live to this reality, and make a pact between the machines so that we also survive and they also do. Now, this is the final part of my talk, and where we talk about the acceptance. The very fact we have realized that the war between AI, ML, and machine and human beings is pretty grave, and machine learning and AI have much higher potential to defeat us. What is our strategy? So, one of the golden rules in such situation is that if you can't fight them, join them and survive together. Now let's try and understand the basic dynamics. Suppose in your organization you have people, and you also have a lot of automation that you are trying to bring in. What should be your strategy? So let's look at this diagram, wherein the circle that you see, human is bringing is all those things that humans do well, and the orange circle is what machine does well. Now there is an overlap in these two areas. Now that is what we have been talking about. Things that humans were doing, now machines can do. And then there are and also see that the orange circle is increasing in size, which means the kind of things machines can do is actually increasing. So what could be our strategy? As an organization, we have people, we have automation, what should we do? So that is taken up in this diagram, and you see many circles, but to lead your eyes, the area which is about, so if you have people in your company, you will have to bring in a lot of innovation in your learning management, so that people can rapidly learn the skill, whatever is your business skill that you want to impart. Secondly, they should be way for those employees to get quickly upgraded to some of the newer AI and ML related skills. So you may not convert everybody to a data scientist, but then there are tools which are like midway tools, you know tools which can give you easy access to machine learning and AI without getting into the gory details of it. So those kind of trainings is one of the important components. Then comes this common area in this Venn diagram, this area which is like a common zone between what machine can do and what man can do. A very good strategy is to create systems which are performance support based, you know uh, where assistance is given using technology to a person who is working on a task. Imagine you are sitting in front of your station, one of your employees is you're doing a work, and there are tools and automations available that makes his job easier. For example, if he has to search a large repository of database to find certain information, and then use that information to have a discussion, live discussion with the client, how to kind of reduce a burden on that human being, so that the the software which is being powered by machine learning or AI is able to guide the person, and really reduce a lot of load from him by making judicious use of AI technologies. so that he is not spending too much time figuring out the right information. That right information is created by the software, and he can then use his skill of talking to the client and presenting various information that is coming his way. So that's the central area. The rightmost area is that if you want to get involved in some kind of a pure AI and ML activity, then you need to have some vision about three things. One is that if you are a machine learning based solutioning that you're looking at, then you need to know and you need to have this sufficient data or the big data. You need to have a high performance computing platform available, infrastructure available to you either on a cloud or you make your own. And then you need to have some kind of a deep learning or AI setup available to you. And if you have these three components, then pretty much that's the best bet. That's the best handshake you can have between these two competing resources. Now I will just dive in directly into some of the things that as a company Stratbeans is doing in these specific areas. The good news is that we operate in almost all the areas, and we are continuously growing our expertise so that we are able to help our clients. Now in terms of performance support, we create systems which can support performing business tasks. The same thing as performance what performance support promises, that can I reduce the decision making or the activity that a human is doing and kind of create assistive agents for the person to be able to do his task much easier. That way the need for training this employee is also reduced. You don't have to really train for longer duration. You can train him well and then start using assistive approach. Other use cases are document search. So you imagine insurance and pharma companies where agents need to quickly find out documents and take decision basis that can be very well done with in partnership with AI and ML technologies. Or if you want to automate certain part of your task that are being done by or your SOPs which are done by your employees using AI algorithms, that is what we are into. That is what we term as automation workflow. And yes, learning management of the old days are not going to work. So there's a learning management plus approach, wherein learning should not become it should be a very proactive activity. The learning management should have a recommendation engine. Just like a very efficient teacher, he should be able to recommend what kind of courses he can do basis his skill set, current existing skill set. And the other very important component is predictive engine. Can we predict for a given organization what is the skill gap and actually suggest what kind of resource to be hired and what kind of training learning path to be given to that particular person. So we are doing it and we are very happy discussing. If any firm is interested in knowing more about it, we are very happy talking about it. And then a lot of good things are happening on the content side. Using technologies like NLU, NLG, people are able to create much shorter courses, much more crisper courses. So that way the training time is reduced, because you don't have to go to the grunt of going through the entire book, but you can go through some well chosen parts so that your learning can happen much faster. And then there are automatic content generation also happening, where question answering systems are there for domains like insurance or for medical representatives. Like you already talked, do human skilling, try to come with an approach with the pre-designed courses and certification. Try to embed a little bit of AI and ML into the curriculum, and that's where I end it. It was really a pleasure to be presenting this in front of you, and this is my particulars, and anybody who's interested may please feel free to contact us. And yes, at the closing note, let's try to create a good ecosystem between man and the machine, so that it's for the bigger benefit for all of us. Thanks a lot.